Welcome to the Zebra BI product update. I'm Andre, the founder at Zebra BI, and I'll guide you through version 4.3 of the Zebra BI visuals for Power BI. This time we have packed 43 new product features, improvements, and bug fixes into this version. We have a revolutionary new algorithm for small multiples in our Zebra BI charts visual. We have a lot of new functionality in the Zebra BI tables visual, including the ability to visualize additional up to 20 columns in your tables. We have introduced a concept of scaled groups within your tables. So follow me when I guide you through some of the examples. Let's start with the major new feature in the Zebra BI charts visual version 4.3. Namely, this is a completely new algorithm for rendering small multiples. Zebra BI charts visual has been quite famous for rendering small multiples, and this time we're taking it to the next level with a completely new algorithm that will optimize the space in certain situations where you have big elements and then other elements, other charts that are much smaller than that, much smaller in value and much less important. What typically happens in a normal small multiples matrix is that the bigger charts will somehow dwarf the other charts and you will have a lot of empty space which is simply not used. Alright, the solution, our new algorithm that is here in the settings, in the layout settings. If you switch to auto, now you see what happens. Certain rows in the matrix are split. They can be split multiple times. Sometimes they are split into 2 charts, sometimes into 3 charts. The ratios of the rows are always automatically calculated so that the complete space is optimized. The result, bigger charts will be even bigger and even more legible. The small charts will be bigger, everything will be much more legible, and wherever you have a situation where you have certain elements much more important, much bigger in value, then remember there's a new algorithm of the small multiples in the Zebra BI charts version 4.3. Now the beautiful thing here is that this algorithm now works with all the charts that we have, so you can still choose, your favorite chart like this by just clicking on our chart slider. Also the other options, especially this one is probably important here now, the top N feature that will filter the top, for example, 9 elements and then combine or aggregate all the small charts into this automatically calculated other category, right? So this is now a really good combination. So try the auto algorithm in small multiples, perhaps with a top N feature. Hopefully it will work great for you. The second major new feature is in our Zebra BI tables visual. Namely, we are now allowing up to 20 additional columns in your Zebra BI tables. And you can switch from a table column to a chart on any of the columns, and you can create so-called scaled groups within your tables. So you can have certain groups of measures in your table and separately scale them together. Let me show you how this works. We'll start with a simple chart. So for now, I only have some sales in my Zebra BI tables visual. I will compare this to previous year and maybe also to plan. So this is the standard Zebra BI functionality now, right? I get all the automatic variances and so on. Now I can start adding custom measures, other types of measures into my table. And I do that by taking, let's start with a portfolio share, for example. I'll just take this. So you add this into the values placeholder. So this is what we had before, right? The new column will show at the end of your table. What is new now that you can actually take this column and now we'll switch the measure type. So you have several options of your measures. What is the type of the measure? Is this an absolute variance? Is this a relative variance? Is this a value, a percentage, and so on, right? But now what is really new is the ability to change this column into a chart. So for example, let's choose this pin chart, right? And now my portfolio shares is visualized in a pin chart, right? So any column, you can change it to a chart or simply have a text column in your table. Let's move on. Let's bring in gross profit, all right? So I'll just add gross profit to my table. Again, I can choose to display it in a bar chart or something like that, right? Also, I now have the ability to individually set the number format on each column. Like in my example, gross profit, let's switch this to thousands, 1 decimal place, something like that. Or maybe without the decimals, and so on. All right, great. So individual setting of number formats for each individual column. Let's move on. I'll add the gross profit for the previous year. Just drop it into the values placeholder. This is now my gross profit previous year. So again, I can change it like that. And now, since I have two charts, now I can try to scale them together. Make sure that they are rendered in the same scale, or in other words, the y-axis of those charts should be synchronized. How do I do that? If you open here, you will see that we have a completely new group of settings called the scaled group, right? And now I can say, all right, my first scaled group is the group of columns that are the default columns in Zebra BI, like actuals, previous year, forecast, and the variances to those scenarios, right? So this is my first group of charts, which is automatically scaled by default, right? Now what I can do is I can say, all right, my gross profit, let's create a second scaled group with this gross profit. All right, this one is now in the scaled group number 2. And now I will take my gross profit for previous year and I will also move it. You see now, when I hover with my mouse over those numbers, the Zebra BI visual will actually show me which columns are in a certain scaled group, which columns are scaled together, right? So this is my first group, and the second group is my gross profit. So now I will scale gross profit previous year with my actual gross profit. All right, now this is a better result here. And moving on, now you can just use this functionality. For example, now I'll bring my gross profit variance to previous year. So let's add the variance for the gross profit. Again, as default, it's always rendered as a table column, just the numbers, but I can change it. Again, I could change it to my bar chart here, but as you see, this is actually a variance. It has positive, negative numbers. So if I go here and just change the measure type to an absolute variance, all right, now the Zebra BI knows that this is actually variance, an absolute variance. It'll just render it red and green. It'll also understand that this is an absolute variance, not a percentage, not a relative variance. So when you now try to scale it, so now I'll take this variance and also move it in my scale group, not number 1, but number 2. Now you see also the variances are scaled to the other gross profit measures. So I have created a table with two groups of measures. One is my sales, the other is my gross profit, and they are separately scaled in this table. You could also choose, in this example, for example, you could actually choose and just scale those additional measures like gross profit and so on to the group number 1, which would actually work in my example. So sales scaled to gross profit, but then you may have measures, other measures that you really don't want to scale because they are of a completely different type, of a completely different unit, and so on. All right, a typical example here would be if you have another variance that is not calculated from your base measure. So not just simple actual versus previous year, but you may have like actual versus plan, but corrected for some currency adjustments, right? So currency adjusted variance to your plan. Okay, so you can calculate this variance in your Power BI model. So you have this measure now, and now you can simply bring it into the Zebra BI table. All right, make sure that you mark it as a variance. Could be an absolute variance, could be also a relative variance. All right. Now you have it, and now you can display it as a chart like this. Now you can, of course, move it around because all the columns are completely flexible. You can move it here, move it there. I don't have enough space here to present my variances, so let me maybe move this previous year here. Turn it into a column, right? So this is probably better. And now I have, look at this, now I have my regular variances, variance to previous year, variance to plan, and my new variance, which is, you know, FX adjusted for the currency or something else, right? And now I can go here and also make sure that this chart is scaled to my first group, so scaled together with my default variances. And this is now a correct display of all of my business information, all of my variances. It does not really matter if they are calculated from your base measures like actual and so on. You can simply bring your own variances or other columns, visualize them, and make sure that they are rendered in the proper scale. You can use these new features in a number of situations. So let me give you one more idea. This time I have a P&L statement with a previous year, actual P&L values, and the difference to previous year. All right. Now, if I want to add the percent of revenue column, I can take it, calculate it in my Power BI model, bring it into the Zebra BI visual by dropping it into the values placeholder, right? So this is now my custom calculated measure. And with the new feature, I can now visualize it as a pin chart, for example, all right? Because this is a relative measure, it's a percentage, I choose to visualize it as a pin chart or a lollipop chart, as it's also called. Okay, so this now shows my margins, right? So, all right, product revenue, this is 100%, right? But I have different types of my product revenue, so I see how much is my product revenue, how much is the service revenue, right? I also see the gross margin, it's 65.9%, and I also see the erosion of the margin here, operating income already 32.5%, and so on, right? The advantage of adding such a column to your P&Ls is that you will also have all the values in your tooltip. Okay, so for example, if I hover with my mouse over product revenue, I will also see the percent of revenue in the tooltip below, right? Or if I hover over the gross margin, I see now percent of revenue. It's 65.9 in my case, right? All right, this is not the end. Now you can bring in also the percent of revenue previous year, like this. Just keep adding the columns into the values placeholder, right? So now I also see how the percent of revenue, how the structure of your accounts has changed from previous year to this year. For example, my gross margin has slightly grown from 64.2 to 65.9, right? And if you want to visualize now the growth rates, right, you can actually calculate this, just simply subtract the actual percent of revenue minus previous year's percent of revenue. You get a new measure, add it again to your Zebra BI visual, and now you have it here, right? So the growth here of my gross margin is actually 1.7%, right? And now you can actually visualize it, okay? So what we will do now is first we will change the measure type, because this is now a variance to previous year, right? I will actually mark it as a variance. It's not a relative variance, right? It's not a relative variance because it's just a subtraction. So it's actually percentage point, right? So I will mark it as an absolute variance and also visualize it. I will just use a chart type, plus minus chart type. So now I see the growth of the changes in my structure, right? And in terms of data visualization, this is not completely correct now because this chart is not scaled. Up until now, I have simply chosen to display it as a plus minus chart, but it's not scaled. It should be scaled to this one, to the percent of revenue column, so that I actually understand what is the percent of revenue and exactly how much is the change in the relation to the length of this chart, right? So again, how do I do this? Now the concept of our scaled groups kicks in. I will just choose to add this percent of revenue, the actual value, here in the scale group number 2, and do the same for my variance. Okay, I'll just add this. You see, not in the first one, these are millions of revenue and so on, and this now is the percentage, so I will scale this one to add this to the second group, and now they are scaled, right? Now I see exactly, what is the true growth rate from, previous year, rendered correctly with proper scaling and so on. And I hope you like this example, and if you calculate your measures, you can do this on your P&L statements. There are many other new features in version 4.3, so let me quickly show just one more which will help you with your design of your Power BI dashboards and reports. Namely, we have added the setting called gap between columns also to the Zebra BI tables visual. We had this before in the Zebra BI charts visual. Now we are bringing this also in the Zebra BI tables visual. So this settings just simply controls the gap between your columns in your tables. So for example, if I just change this to 40, for example, now I have 40% space, or if I set this to 80%, for example, right, now my columns are very narrow. So you can do this with column charts, bar charts, waterfall charts even. It just simply allows you to have more control over the design of your charts. You can have one chart for sales that is very thick, right? And then you have another chart with prices, and you can make it much, much more narrow, right? So it will distinguish the types of measures which in turn will then be more legible, more understandable for your end users. All right, we have other improvements like that. Also, a lot of bug fixes, right? So this version is now much improved. I want to thank everybody who has reported the issues to us. If you see something that in your mind does not work as expected, or if there are any type of glitches, please do reach out to us. Write to support at Zebra BI, we are very happy to get the reports from you, because we continue developing our visuals. We do provide bug fixes. Very happy to do that. So we're already working on the next version, right? So thank you, everyone. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to click subscribe right now, because the next version that is coming out will be also presented here. And for the details, just please check the product update page on our Zebra BI webpage here. So all of the other details are explained on the page. Thank you.